John, who is currently on mute. Scotty is monitoring the conversation live today, and this is a quick invite before we get started here. Of course, all questions, comments, thoughts are welcome. So please, if there's anything that we talk about today that you want to expand or you want us to expand on, or any questions that you want to have answered, please make sure that you're putting them in the comments. Scotty will be monitoring those. So we are very fortunate to have Arup Sinha join us today. Arup, how are you?
Very good. Thanks for having me today.
No, thanks for coming on. And you're out in the New York City area. And up until recently, Arup was with JP Morgan in their strategic advisory and solutioning practice. In that role, he was responsible for advising treasurers in the C-suite on their complex treasury and payments challenges. So again, very, very nice to meet you. Very nice to have you on. We look forward to this conversation. And again, Treasury community, if you have any questions for Arup as we go, please ask them. Scotty is monitoring, but with that, I'll lead it off. So Arup, just in getting to know you, you've spent time in banking, you've spent time in consulting and advisory, and you've been a practitioner. What have been some of the highlights and what have been some of the major differences throughout the course of your career and in these industries?
That's a brilliant question. And I think I'll start with a little bit about my career progression. I started my career with General Electric and spent about 12 years across its various global treasury locations, but primarily focusing on global cash management, bank product, treasury technology, treasury restructuring, and the treasury M&A side of the house. And its offshoots differently, the due diligence, integrations, and separations. My first 6 years was at G Headquarters Treasury, where I also learned the intricacies of the G portfolio of businesses, whether it was on the capital side, including the consumer and commercial finance, or whether it was on the industrial side, whether it was aircraft engines or healthcare or energy. And then I moved on to run the treasury for treasury ops for NBC Universal, where I eventually landed up taking the company out of the GE structure, revamped it, so both domestic and international treasury. Along came the whole bank centralization and the treasury technology implementation, because everything that we were using, it was GE's, so had to literally cut off the business and started a fresh organization. And then once I stabilized, I moved on to run the treasury M&A for MasterCard, where I was looking at the global evolving payment companies across the payment space. These companies were in mobile payments, data analytics, prepaid card, you name it, digital wallets. So I was pretty much looking into their credit, financial, operational, settlement kind of a risk aspect of it, and then eventually led into the product synergies as well. And then the offshoots of the integrations or spin-off from a treasury perspective came in. And after MasterCard, I decided to move into the advisory role at EY and KPMG. And the difference between being a practitioner coming into the advisory role, one of the things that I had to learn was how to actively go out and network and go into not only on the networking side, but also how to bring all the niche skill sets as a practitioner that I had learned over a period of time to bring in and translate that in a very succinct way and translate that into a concept selling, because now you're speaking to the treasurers and the CFOs and who give you literally an hour, 45 minutes to an hour of window. So one, you have to learn what matters most to them, what is their pressure points, and then translate them into from your experiences as to how you can help them. And so that 45-minute is very, very critical to understand what their pressure points is and how you can help and what that journey roadmap should look like. So those were the skill sets that I had to learn. I'm glad that I had the right kind of mentors along my career, both as a practitioner as well as on the advisory side. And from EY and KPMG, I mean, I moved on to KPMG in a bigger and a broader role where I was pretty much leading a lot of business development effort apart from the whole project delivery side of the house. And then from KPMG, I moved into JP Morgan to be their strategic advisor looking into the client's complex challenges and around treasury payments and treasury and payments arena.
Yeah, you went right from the buyer side right over to the seller side, and just kind of never looked back, huh?
Yeah, absolutely. And one thing that I that was key to me was having appreciation for the bank, because being on the practitioner side or being on the advisory side, I used to ask a whole lot of questions, both on the technology and the product side. Hey, by the way, can you refine this product in such and such fashion so when the product comes from for its execution on the corporate side, it has X, Y, and Z extra bells and whistles. Wait a minute, now you come back on the bank side, and now you are being asked the same question. Now you're working with your technology partners within the bank and trying to help refine those products. I think you definitely have a different level of appreciation for those teams who actually take your feedback, translate that into the business requirement, and deliver on that. I think that was one of the biggest learnings, apart from definitely the relationships and things that you build up over a period of time.
Yeah, it's like baptism by fire, trying to manage stakeholders and figure all that out while trying to deliver the value that your client's looking for. So it sounds like it was an amazing test for you.
It was very good.
Yeah, and you ended up with the trifecta here in Treasury, right? Industry, advisory, and then banking. So, if you could go back and give one piece of advice to the younger version of yourself, the you starting right out at the beginning of your career, what would that piece of advice be?
I think there's a lesson learned, and this is literally paying it forward. I learned the hard way and through my various iterations about going from a practitioner into the advisory side of it was to understand one basic thing as to how the business makes the money and what is the business operating model that you're in, whether it is your organization that you're in currently. Try to understand how the business makes money, what is its business operating model, and then from that will literally filter it down to looking into the cash flows. And then when you start looking into the cash flows, you'll very soon realize that the business is either on the net investment side or on the debt side. And over a period of time, what I've also learned is those kind of engagements, those kind of thought processes then translates back into the organization's perspective into how they want to manage their global cash. It literally changes if the organization is on the debt side of the house. The approach towards the cash management is going to be very conservative. It will be more hands-on, as opposed to organizations who are cash-rich entities. They will be eager to more talk about M&A, more talk about the whole other suite of risk and exposures that they currently have, or they may want to think about how we can grow from this point to sometime in the future as to what are the different diversifications that I want to take on to. So the concept or the conversation literally changes from organization being on the cash negative versus cash positive side. So those are a few of the things that I would say from an advice perspective, try to get down to understand how the business actually makes money and what is the business operating model.
Yeah, we hear that time and time again from treasury leaders, from people who've been around the industry for a very long time. It's like, pop your head up, take a look around outside of just the four walls that are around you, and figure out what's going on in the business and try to get involved and help solve problems. So I think that's great advice, and I appreciate you sharing that. You mentioned this earlier that you've had a lot of help through mentorship, and you've seen the value firsthand of mentorship throughout the course of your career. And you said you were kind of forced to network by the time you flipped over to the advisory side. But what's been your approach to networking and mentorship throughout your career, and what advice would you give to the audience listening right now?
Yeah, I mean, let's look into the mentorship first, and then we'll switch over to the networking side. Sure. Mentorship is something, it's a relationship, and you have to be honest about it. One is to understand what is the job that you are doing currently. Do you understand the job fully? Mm-hmm. Be honest about it. Be candid about it. Seek a person, seek a colleague, seek a senior who can literally guide you through. Have an open dialogue. I think that is key. That builds the confidence into that relationship. And that relationship can be at a peer level, that can be at a between a executive team member and the direct report. It can be somebody outside of the organization, outside of your team, maybe on a somebody in the cross-functional teams. So have that open and candid relationship with that person. Talk about your challenges. Try to learn from them as to how did they, when they came in to the organization, what their career path looked like, what made them successful. Try to learn those kind of aspects within that mentorship. Along the way, what you would also find is there are few people who are mentoring you silently by giving you some of the challenging tasks, and you have to deliver on it. So that is another kind of a mentoring aspect of it. But at the same time, again, it all boils down to being honest about what your skill sets are, being honest about where you want to go with that skill set, and seeking help when you really need it, and having an open dialogue with that mentor. Along my career, when I look back, and look back both at GE or NBC or MasterCard or varied advisory or banking side of the house, I always had, silent mentors who have been there, and I recognize it in the hindsight. Yeah, if I run into something that I think somebody would be able to help me, I will pick up a phone and talk to that person. Hey, by the way, remember you and I, we connected on this issue about 15 years or 20 years back. Remember, and we will talk about this scenario, and I'll talk about the certain current scenario that I may be facing. And that's the open dialogue. That's a relationship that you continue, that transforms into being a friends kind of a relationship. So that is the confidence that you build over a period of time. And mentors do play a big role in your career progression, because they literally help you guide through certain challenges, certain blockages in your career, and they will help you. So try to find those kind of people with whom you are comfortable. That is the biggest key. Try to be the person with whom you're comfortable. You are literally going to have an open and honest dialogue, and to find that person, that is literally something that everybody in this professional world should be able to do that.
Yeah.
Now, switching gears onto the networking side. On the networking side, I would say I did not actively start networking until I joined the advisory side of the house. Mm-hmm. But throughout my practitioner's role, it was a silent networking. It was a networking within the Treasury organization, within the tax and legal organization, because those are your key partners with your audit teams, with your accounting teams, with your controllership teams. So you are literally building up the network. You are supporting the cross-functional teams in some or the other way through your role and responsibility. But for me, it was happening silently, and those mentors literally took a risk at me in terms of moving me from one role to the higher role that is the confidence that you build on based on your mentoring. So it's kind of loosely tied, but so networking and mentoring in the practitioner side, it is loosely tied. But at the same time, when you switch industry from being a practitioner over to the advisory or to the banking, it becomes more sales oriented, more career oriented, more professional associations. And for me, I literally didn't start actively looking for it or pushing myself out of my comfort zone till I joined advisory, because at that point, one part of the conversation becomes, okay, here I am to talk to you about your pressure points, about your challenges. But even before you get to that level, you have to network. You have to know that person as an individual first, then as a professional, and be genuine about it. Do not have any expectations in return. And very many client conversations, I have just had an open dialogue with the person that I went to see, and had an open quality conversation about their pressure points, their challenges, and in result, silent expectation is, yes, you would get some kind of a sale out of it, being on the sales side of the story, or either on the advisory or on the banking side. Yeah. That's a subtle aspect of it. But the foremost thing is are you able to provide, are you able to offer your help to that person that you're meeting for the first time? And that is where you start building the bond. That is where you start creating the confidence in that networking relationship. And that conversation, the 45 minutes or an hour conversation, may translate into nothing. I mean, you will just get a thank you note. Hey, by the way, thanks for spending. We had a quality conversation. But guess what? Through your 45 minutes of dialogue or 1 hour of dialogue, you gave that person or that the treasurer or the CFO some good piece of advice that really may have lighted some kind of a bulb in his thought process, and he may want to further explore it. But you literally helped that person without even selling anything. And tomorrow, when the opportunity comes again for actually giving some business out to you, if you're on a sales side of it, guess what? Who is going to be your first point of contact? Who is going to be your first point of call? It is that person who is going to pick up the phone and say, hey, by the way, remember this date, we talked about this issue, we talked about this challenge, and you gave me this idea or this thought process, and it helped me. So here I am, and let's talk about this opportunity. And that's how it translates the networking into the sales side of the house.
No, it makes perfect sense. And just going back to it, I love the idea of the silent mentor. I hadn't heard it put in that terms before. But, so many people rush to put titles and labels on things like, oh, I need a mentor. It's like, well, who do you go to for help, or who's coming to you for help? And who are you helping solve problems? How are you guys working together? A lot of times that's your mentor. And you just may not even realize that we're just in a rush to, I need someone who's above me, and I need someone who's going to help shape my career. But it's a mentor-mentee relationship really goes both ways, because you're providing value back that way, and it does help you build your network at the same time. So you're right. Then, like, I know I'm kind of carrying the connection here, but they're so closely intertwined. They're almost the same thing in a lot of aspects.
Absolutely, and it goes beyond that. I mean, if you start looking into the mentor-mentee relationship, you are trying to capture on the intrinsic knowledge of that person whom you think is going to be mentor, and that intrinsic knowledge would be tied to a specific organization. It may be tied to a specific business. It may be tied to a specific industry. So depending upon what part or where you are in your career, you may want to tap into those kind of people in that organization, in that industry, in that business, to explore as to how you can learn and be open about it. I mean, I think that is, have an open mind towards the learning. I mean, do not go into it with a preconceived notions that, hey, by the way, he's going to accelerate my career path by X number of years. No, that is the wrong approach.
Definitely.
Yeah, I think it's also really interesting, and we haven't had a lot of people talk about, right, these days sales is a dirty word in so many circles. You certainly see plenty of hate on sales and salespeople on LinkedIn posts, but I think you made the point, and it's a really good one, that all sales really is, or at least the best kind of sales is adding value and solving problems. And so I think, that's a really great point. And the fact of the matter is that's, networking, just like you said, Joe, we want to put labels on. Networking is building relationships. And the best way to do that is to try to add value for people and help them solve their problems. And Arup, I love that you talk about, not really having expectations around that, because if you keep it that way, that actually ultimately pays dividends, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And look, from a sales perspective, in my view, I think it all starts with the relationship. And the relationship, if you start kind of dissecting the relationship, it all starts with confidence and the trust. And it all starts with a simple conversation as to what matters most to you and how can I be helpful within the professional conversation that I'm here to talk about. And if that is the motive behind it, and if you're solving certain of the challenges, certain of the issues that the treasurers or the CFOs or the director of treasury or the assistant treasurers may be having in their organizations, in their operational environment, you are golden. I mean, you literally gave them a solution, you gave them a thought process that they can tap into. And guess what? Today, tomorrow, maybe month or a year out, there may be an opportunity where they want to come back and say, hey, by the way, there is an opportunity for you. Instead of me calling a total different person, I know you have given me a food for thought. Let's talk about it, because you were very honest and candid about sharing your thoughts, and that may have helped that person. So that's where the sales should be the last. I mean, selling should be the last check the box kind of a thing. I think it all starts with a relationship, and end result may be sale, it may not be sale, but what you did along the way is you established a very good networking relationship with that person, with that community. And yeah, when there is a right opportunity, you would be the first point of call.
Well, and it takes a high level of emotional intelligence, right, to network effectively, but also just to sell in general. And we've seen a link between global citizens and people who tend to have a high EQ. So curious, you grew up in India, you've been in the US for some time now. What advice do you have for our listeners who are interested in becoming a global citizen?
That's a brilliant question. I'm kind of trying to think through. I think looking at my career path, I joined my career back with GE India and in the shared service side of the house. And what made me successful through these years is I have been active learner and active listener. And I'm a staunch believer of this is not my code, somebody else's code, that God has given us 2 ears and 1 mouth. So try to listen. The more you listen, the more you are getting educated about a scenario, about a situation. And the more it basically enables you to ask the right questions. And asking the right questions translates into having the right kind of a quality conversation. So that is one thing. Be an active learner, be an active listener, and but absolutely challenge the status quo as well. And the only way you can challenge the status quo is if you have listened well, if you are educated on that scenario or on that situation, that would translate into a quality conversation. But at the same time, I'm just kind of thinking, have an open mind and do not go into any conversation with some kind of a bias approach or preconceived notion, because literally you are not doing yourself any favor. You're literally creating a wall in front of you that you yourself have to climb to get to the right context of the situation. I think that is something which is key. And being at certain parts of the globe, what you need to also understand is have an appreciation for the cultural differences. That is also key, because you never know who the other person is, how that accent looks like, what the background may look like, just because he may not be very fluent in English. But if you look at some of the concrete things that he had put for the organization, it's mind-blowing. And this is something that I had an opportunity to go through my whole G tenure and come across quite a great talent skill sets who did not speak English very well, but they had developed certain kind of best practices in their organization within the Treasury environment that we literally ported all the way up to the headquarters level. So going into certain kind of notions is not good, and appreciate the cultural differences, because and be actively aware of it, actively cautious about not having a preconceived notion, not going into any kind of a bias, any kind of a conversation with a bias approach. I think those are some of the things that I think it has made me well. It has created success for me, and I think that may resonate with the rest of the crew here as well.
And just a quick follow-up question on that. I mean, obviously there's a lot of risk involved relocating from India to the US, and that's a major transition. What is there any one thing you can point to that was like, yep, that's the catalyst, and I'm jumping into this with both feet, and whatever happens, happens? I mean, was there any aha moment for you in terms of that?
I think the language does become a barrier. to a certain point if you're moving from one country to another country, just because the accent neutralization has to take place. But so that is one part of it. But then it all boils down to the culture of the organization as well. If the culture of the organization is open and it accepts the brilliant ideas, brilliant thought processes, then all these accents and all these other kind of things becomes moot at that point. I think it has a lot to do with the culture that the organization across the globe has to create and cultivate within its resources.
Makes sense. And yeah, I think the cultural fit is so important. It's a great segue into the next question that we have, Arup, which is, when you're hiring into your teams in the past, what do you look for? Like, what kind of makes the best hire? And I think let's start there, Guy. We'll likely have a follow-up question to that.
Sure. So from the hiring perspective, I think, you are as good as what you are able to contribute. And if you're working as a part of the team, you need to, and if you're a hiring manager, you have to understand what are the strengths and weaknesses of your team, including yours. So chart it down and then filter it down to literally what is the delta between what is the skill set that you're missing, what is the job requirement that you need to have, and what kind of aptitude that you're looking into from a hiring perspective. Now, from that point, you need to then further break it down to the tactical level in terms of the technical skills. And if you go from a organization's hierarchy, depending upon how junior or senior that hiring request is for, the more of a senior resource that you're looking to hire, I think the more of a technical skills you need. But at the same time, if you're looking at the junior level, I would hire anybody who is hungry to learn. I mean, that's what it comes down to. You can literally, if the person has a basic skill sets, right? I mean, from the treasury side of the house, I can mentor that person because somebody did mentor me at the start of my career and along the way as well. So it's like paying forward, but at the same time, are you ready to invest in that person who is hungry to learn? I think those are some of the key things that I would be looking from the hiring side of the story.
Yeah. Oh, sorry, Scott, go ahead.
Sorry, no, Joe, I think we're probably about to say the same thing, right? But it's interesting, the follow-up question was the focus more on soft skills or technical skills? And I think it's interesting that you've actually kind of got a profile in mind for softer skills seem to be for you weighted more heavily, maybe at the lower levels, just in terms of like, okay, if this person's hungry to learn and willing to learn, I can teach the technical skills. And it makes sense that the higher, once you get to a certain point in the org, you're going to absolutely need the technical skills. And I'm sure at that point, it's like, you prefer not to have to choose. You want both, right? But it's interesting that the technical skills, you put a little bit more premium on at the higher levels in the org.
Right.
Yeah,
absolutely. And without discounting any of the soft skills, I mean, the more higher you go up, it becomes more of a soft skills that you have to have at the leadership level, because at that time you are literally managing a team. That is where the people aspect comes into play. You have to be knowing everybody within the team as a person, what matters most to them, what are their strengths, what are the weaknesses. Those are on the softer skills, and that comes along the way as you grow into the leadership roles as well, because that's where the emotional intelligence kicks in.
Yeah, and we have that conversation with clients time and time again when they're hiring at like the analyst and manager level. At the lower levels, it's, hey, a lot of the time you're going to be hiring for potential and someone who's coachable, willing to learn, opposed to the proven commodity, because that proven commodity is already ready to move forward with the next step in their career.
Right.
So, now, go ahead. Were you going to say something? No. All right. So I guess my question for you, you've seen both sides of this, right? You've worked with treasurers, you've worked with the C-suite, and you're kind of getting the perspective from both sides of what good treasurers look like, opposed to maybe those who maybe aren't bad but aren't as effective as the good treasurers. So just having that unique perspective in your eyes, what makes a good treasurer? Like what is the commonality that you've noticed with successful treasurers?
I think from a successful treasurer, one thing that I've seen across the board is definitely their technical skills has to be to the par. So that has to be there. On the softer skills, I think the treasurer has to manage up and down, and on the cross-functional side as well at their peer level. And people who I have interacted and I've seen successful, they have been able to do the relationship side of the management, both managing up, meaning at the CFO and the CEO and the C-suite level, but at the same time managing his broader organization, knowing the person, knowing the team as an individual, as well as the strengths and weaknesses, and investing a time to up their skill sets. And that is something which is critical, because treasury is not something which is static. It is a moving target all the time, because it changes with how the economy changes. And I think when you start looking at managing up at the CFO or the CEO or the C-suite level, I think the ability for a treasurer to translate the economy back into what you may think about, giving them the confidence that yes, their cash, that which is literally the lifeblood of our organization, is within the safe hands. There is a control and governance around that cash. And I'm talking about cash. I'm using cash as a very loose term. I'm talking about the cash liquidity, cost of funds. You can talk about the capital markets. I mean, you can talk cash in a very broad way. So I'm using cash as at a very, very broader level. But at the same time, I think the ability to give them the analytics behind what and how you're making them comfortable, I think that is also very key. So I think that is something that is critical. As long as the CFO knows that, okay, you're on top of a game, you are keeping them abreast, you're keeping yourself abreast with how the economy is going, and what are the steps that you are taking in terms of running the whole cash side of the story, looking into the costs, looking into other aspects of the pricing as well. So if you're literally on top of a game, I think that will separate you from the lousy ones. I mean, I'm yet to find a lousy one, but if I have to close my eyes, I can think about one without naming the name. But yeah, and it was not that person's fault. It may be just my experience at that point of time, because that organization was already going through a divestiture, and he had already been given the notice. So at that point of time, my interaction was there. So no wonder, no opinions or no comments on that.
Ever the diplomat here, Arup.
Yeah, I had to be a little bit diplomatic about the scenario, but yeah, like that's a true scenario. The perception may change depending upon at what point of the journey, the treasurer's journey, you're interacting with that person. If the treasurer is new, is literally ready to fold their sleeves, dive into the strategic as well as tactical aspects. But if the treasurer knows already that, hey, by the way, my runway is literally cut short, and this is my date, I mean, how much of an attraction you can expect?
Yeah. I mean, it ties into leadership principles and even as a people manager too, right? It's getting to know, understanding the context around the performance or what's going on in that person's life or what they're up against, what's going on just outside of what you can see, and really taking that into consideration as you're making judgment calls one way or another. So it's, I know it's a random thought, but it's
no, that's I couldn't have said it better. So thanks for saying that.
Yeah.
Well, and it begs, the final question that we have for you today. And I just want to mention really quick that I swear I saw a question in the comments, not finding it now. But if you have questions for us, for Arup or for us here at Treasury Talent, please make sure they're in the comments here under the live feed. But the last question, you mentioned obviously that, as the economy changes, the role of the treasurer changes, and now we're seeing, technology change so rapidly that's also going to impact the role of the treasurer in the coming years. So how do you see the role of the treasurer evolving, whether it's economics or technology in the coming years, Arup?
Yeah, we'll touch the technology first, and then we'll kind of chime into economics as well. Now, if you start looking at the technology, I would translate that into the digitalization or the automation. And I would bucketize it into 3 buckets. One is the organization that was already running with the digitalization kind of approach, and they were literally the forefronts of those automation and on the digitalization run. Then the second bucket would be for the organizations who were in the middle of that digitalization journey or the digital journey. And the third bucket would be for the organizations that were not very much eager to move from the legacy way of doing things, and anything digital was a total Latin and Greek to them. In those scenarios, I'll hold on to that thought for that third bucket. But taking the first stab, I think the organizations that were literally at the forerunners and the front runners of the digital strategy, I think they got this COVID situation has given them the opportunity to refine their strategy furthermore, because this is something that literally put all their practices, all their policies, all their governance, and all their strategies and all their tactical steps into a test mode. And this is something, as they come through the scenario, they would be coming in a much refined version of their digital strategy. So that is the first group. The second group is for the organizations that are that were already on the digital path, midway or towards the end of it. What they would have seen is their digital strategy has accelerated multiple folds. And as they come out, they are going to be learning a whole lot of best practices, because it's literally, they were already maybe on the pilot mode, and they are learning those. Hopefully they are agile in their learning process as well. And then the third bucket, which is the organization that maybe they were at the starting point of their digital journey. Guess what? They literally had to drink it from the fire hose. I mean, there is no easy or the other choice of word that I have, because that is where it is. That is how it is. And now bringing in the economy, I think I will go back into understanding where the cash is, understanding the inflows of the cash, how they collect cash, how they concentrate cash, and how they pay out, what is the outflow of the cash. And then looking at each of these different flows of cash, whether it is from the inflow perspective, concentration perspective, or the outflow perspective, from people, process, technology, and control, I think that is how they need to look at whether it may translate into how they do the cash pacing, how they forecast the cash, how they go back into partnering with their cross-functional teams. Maybe they need to up their relationship with their AP and the AR team, talk about the certain KPIs, whether they are thinking from the DSOs and the DPOs and the cash conversion cycle. Maybe these are the jargons that are used within the CFO office. But when you translate them back into at the field level, what does it translate into? I mean, from a cash pacing perspective, if you are supposed to be collecting cash, what are your KPIs? I mean, are you going to be, how many calls are you making? What is the dollar threshold that you're supposed to be collecting? How you're recording that? So translation of those DPOs, DSOs, cash conversion cycles back into the KPIs at the field level, I think that is critical. And if you push everything and bucketize everything on the economy side and bring in now how your cash flow as an organization would translate as you come out this whole COVID scenario, there is a lot of best practices that you would learn, not only from a technology perspective, but from operations and the process and process improvement perspective as well, because over a period of time, almost a year now, that we'll be in this scenario, teams have developed a lot of best practices. So as you come out, and once this whole COVID situation kind of stabilizes and it gives an opportunity to huddle back into the room, let's put all those ideas, all those best practices on the whiteboard and see what best practices that we can continue to live on with. So those are some of the things that I think is going to be very critical for a treasurer, not only to think through from a technology perspective, but also the best practices that were either evolved or refined during this time frame.
Yeah, it's kind of like the pandemic forced a lot of people's hands and forced a lot of people to adapt. And then as we start to pull out of this, it'll be more of a, hey, what are the best practices that we're keeping around, and what was just that temporary Band-Aid to keep the lights on and keep everything moving?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Cool. And we did have Vandit. Thank you very much for texting questions in earlier. And Arup, we covered a lot of these questions, just the finer aspects of networking. What should we be aware of, and should networking only mean knowing more and more people, or should it only be with people who can enhance your career? I think you did a pretty good job of answering that earlier, or touching on both of those topics earlier. But is there anything you'd want to add just on top of what we've already talked about?
I think the cross-functional kind of networking is equally important, because if you are in Treasury, by default, Treasury operates with the cross-functional teams, meaning the tax, accounting, controllership, legal, for obvious reasons, right? And Treasury becomes on the operation side of the house. So networking with those key stakeholders, with your peers within each of these departments, would not only help you to learn more about their environment, their what they do, and how does that impact in your organization, and some of the roles and responsibilities that you are supposed to be kind of running. So it's a kind of a mutual beneficial kind of a relationship, but at the same time, it basically feeds into expanding your knowledge base. And I think, if not for anything, go after expanding your knowledge base. I think that is one thing that I would say, when you network, try to learn something new with that person. What makes them successful? What has been their career journey? I mean, and you'll be surprised to learn so many things. I mean, even on a silent note basis, because there are certain subtle things that the other person will communicate it to you that will literally light a aha moment for you, or light a bulb in your thought process.
Yeah, and just to touch on the cross-functional networking, I mean, you hit it right off the bat. Was in order to learn about the business, you have to get to know people outside of your direct organization, and no better way to do that than cross-functional networking. I mean, it becomes a necessity if you're going to be a strategic partner to the business in Treasury.
Absolutely.
Cool. Scotty, do we have anything else from the audience?
No, like I said, I think I might have missed something. I'm not sure if someone messaged me directly or if they deleted their comment, but there's no questions that have come through the comments at this point in time. So, yeah. Well,
perfect. Arup, with that, a lot of good stuff. I mean, I really enjoyed the conversation, and thank you very much for your time. I think you provided a lot of good insight just around networking and relationships, and you certainly have an interesting story to tell with a pretty incredible pedigree, considering everything that you've touched within Treasury. So thank you very much. Treasury Talent community, as always, thanks for tuning in and asking your questions. Vandit, thank you for texting your questions ahead of time. We will see you again next Wednesday. And with that, we will see you later. Have a good evening. Thanks, Arup.
Awesome. Thank you. And thanks for having me here. Pleasure is mine.